So I am here with Rob Stiff, otherwise known as the Balloon Guy. How are you doing today?
I'm good.
Awesome. Thank you for joining me.
Yeah, I'm not sure this is going to be all it cracks up to be, but I'm planning on you being a good interviewer.
Well, then we are screwed. Why don't we start by I want to know how you became, how did you get to be Balloon Guy from regular guy? I mean, what got you into balloons?
Well, my wife was a florist, and I was a heavy equipment operator. And in the early 90s, things slowed way down in the building in California. So I went to go work with her, and I hate flowers. And so one day she had a balloon drop for a New Year's Eve thing at this country club. And I said, I'll help out. So, I tied 500 or 600 balloons. It took hours and hours. We did the balloon drop and it worked. I bought a little kit. So the next year, she asked me to do it again. And I can't even tell you what I did that year, working miscellaneous jobs. And it didn't work. So here's a balloon drop for New Year's Eve. And I tried to use a 10-pound test line so it would disappear so people wouldn't see it. When I pulled the line, it broke. So the balloons never opened. Happy New Year. So I'm walking out dejected, and this lady turns to me and says, as I'm walking out, she says, I only stayed to see the balloons fall. So I felt about 2 inches, and I said, this is it. I'm out of the balloon business. This is bullcrap. So my wife finds this class at Conwin Carbonics, which is a balloon equipment manufacturer in LA, a class on balloon drops. And I said, okay, I'll take it so I don't screw this up next year. Well, the guy who was doing it, his name is Treb, Treb. He is the biggest balloon guy in the world. And he was kind of getting out of balloons. Honestly, he had made his money. He had done everything there was to do, from the Academy Awards to Super Bowl halftime shows to the Olympics. He did almost every major mall opening. He did so much stuff. His portfolio was just sickening. Anyway, he was talking balloons, and he poured out his love for balloons in a way that made me want to know more about this. We got to talking afterwards, and he was telling me how much money he made at balloons, and I was like, that's insane. So I decided to start getting into balloons, and I kind of started, reading more about it. And there was no internet back then that I used the internet for making fun of people.
And so this was like in the mid 90s. Is that when it was?
Early 91, 90, okay. 92. And so I started learning how to do balloons. I took classes from this all-American balloon company in LA. I drove all the way to LA to take classes. And my wife's flower shop was doing more and more decorations. Just besides centerpieces, she was doing decorations. And so we were selling balloons. So the first balloon arch I did was just ugly as can be. And anyway, I just started doing balloons, and I found that I learned how to tie really fast. Right now, I can blow and tie a balloon for a balloon drop about 22 a minute, steady. And I'm, just found a knack for it. I mean, it was a weird thing. I'm a heavy equipment operator. I literally got off the back of a bulldozer, and a couple of years later, I'm tying balloons and enjoying it.
You went from the heaviest equipment to the lightest of equipment.
Exactly. And the funny thing now is people ask me, what do you do? And I'm actually a event decorator. I decorate parties with props and lighting and special effects, but I love balloons. And so I tell them I do balloons for a living. And they always are embarrassed for me. And they say, oh, you mean those hot air balloons? And I say, no, little tiny balloons, because there's no money in hot air balloons. And they always look at me funny. But then I tell them, yeah, I've done 2 Super Bowl halftime shows myself. I've done the Republican convention, the Democratic convention, MTV Video Music Awards, half the TV shows like The Voice and stuff. I've done those.
You've come a long way since that first one that didn't work. Do you ever, when you're about to do a big balloon drop, like you're at the Super Bowl, do you still have some fear that the balloons aren't going to come out, or you're just so good at it now you know it's going to work?
Balloon drops are like foolproof. There's a way to test them beforehand. I never worry about balloon drops, but I do a lot of effects. Like I used to do exploding balloon walls. We would take 3 foot balloons and make a wall of balloons. The biggest one I did was 80 feet long and 16 feet tall. And every balloon has to explode at the exact same moment. And so I used this shock tube, which was from the mining industry, and it has a luminized HMX running through it. And I would poke a hole in this tube and tape that to the balloon. And I would use a shotgun shell primer cap to shoot this off with an initiator. And when it went off, literally in less than a second, every balloon explodes. And it's just such a magnificent effect. And it was, I was charging $5,000-6,000 for each wall. It literally cost me like $300 in material, but it was an effect that was like, how much is it worth? I don't know who else does it in the country. There was maybe a dozen of us in the whole country that did it. I did the Experience Music Project in Seattle. I did the opening for that. I did I did a bunch of weird things for it. I revealed a helicopter in Las Vegas for Sikorsky helicopter. I mean, it's just weird. Anyway, those things drove me nuts. I would stress my hair. I would pull my hair out and just pace back and forth. I couldn't go to the bathroom. I was just nervous the whole time. And then when it finally come time and I'd shoot it, and I'd be better. Oh yeah. But you can't test it. You can't do it. It's a pure 100% effect. I mean, one time they were doing pyro behind a wall, and the guy said, "Look, that's a $10,000 pyro show. If your balloon wall doesn't go off, you're paying for it." And I know he was kind of joking heartedly, but I'm like, ah. So luckily the ATF took care of that for me. The ATF got more and more stringent on the rules to the point that I had to have the equivalent license of a guy who blows up buildings, and I got it. I had a high explosive use permit, and then they still wouldn't let me do this. And so now, if I ever do it, when I do it occasionally, last one I did was for Hell's Kitchen TV show, and I had to bring a pyro guy in to kind of, I just worked under his license. So he was sitting there the whole time and watching me work, and he made $1,000. So I'm like, I got to become a pyro guy. But that's a hard
I
license.
had no idea it was regulated like that. So how do they, how do they even know that you're going to do that sort of thing? How do they stay on top of that?
It's the buying of the shock tube. The shock tube comes from the mining industry, and a luminized HMX is a high explosive. Now, there's literally one thimbleful of high explosive in 1,000 feet of this cord, but any amount whatsoever, it becomes regulated by the ATF, whoever they are now. I don't think they're not the ATF anymore, are they?
Are they not?
I don't know.
You're supposed to know that.
I got twice a year they would come in and inspect my shop and find something wrong. One lady actually told me I had to coat my brass fittings on my magazine that I stored this in because she didn't want the brass to spark. And I was like, you're an ATF agent and you're telling me that I have to coat brass to prevent it from sparking?
Well, they were probably really just, that was an excuse to look for the cigars.
There was a few there too. There was one in my mouth.
So you said that Treb guy poured out his love for balloons to you, and it seems like you caught some of that love for balloons. Can you say something about that? Like why do you, aside from clearly you made a good living doing this, what is it that you actually like or love about doing this job?
Well, there's a couple things I always tell people when I'm selling them balloons. I tell them that balloons paint the air with color. You can do a light in somewhere, and you've got to have something to reflect the light, a wall, a prop, a piece of spandex, or you have to fill the room with haze to get, but I can put color right in the middle of the air. I can fill a ballroom for 1/10 of the budget of fabric or decor. And I can do stuff that creates visual energy that makes people excited. I said, when you walk into a big, a corporate dinner, right? You walk in and there's $200 centerpieces and 5 wine glasses and 6 forks and knives. People feel uncomfortable because most people don't dine like that. But when you walk into a party and you see balloons, you say, oh, this is a fun party. So I make people feel good. And that's, I'm blowing up balloons almost every time I blow balloons up. Kids run up to me and I give them balloons. And they just, they feel great. I feel cool doing it. It's a good feeling all the time. And the fact that, it's a ridiculous amount of money is pretty cool.
Well, let me hear more about that. So I know that you made a good amount of money for a while, and when I first met you, you seemed to be sort of riding high on the financial front. And then there was like a downswing in the balloon industry,
Yeah, well,
or
in
you just for you personally.
2006, I had developed my business. I owned two buildings. One was paid off, 5,200 square foot warehouses. I was, making money hand over fist, and I thought I was the king, right? And really, what was going on was everybody was spending money on, I was in these hotels out in the desert. I live in Palm Springs, and in the desert, people, they have conventions, and they have a welcome party, and they have a get to know everybody party, and then they have a final night party, and they usually do an offsite party. And I would get three, four, five parties from each group. And I'd be doing as many as 40 parties a week out here. And there was maybe four or five other people like me doing the exact same thing I was doing. And we were so busy we could barely move. It just was nonstop. So, of course, being an idiot that I am, I decided that since I'm really good at this business, I must be good at everything I touch. So I decided to get into real estate. So in 2006, because I waited till I was sure that everything was going up, in 2006, I bought a $700,000 piece of dirt that I was going to build this $2.5 million home on, and my wife wanted to live in it, and I realized, the mortgage is going to be 20,000 a month. We weren't living in it, but everyone else is making money doing this, so why can't I? So I didn't. Instead, everything collapsed. When Lehman Brothers went bankrupt, they were remodeling the Ritz Carlton, and the Ritz Carlton was right below our development, and that shut down the value of that property. So long story short, I got behind on my payments. Oh, I refinanced my buildings because I couldn't write off the taxes from the lot. So I refinanced it to pay the lot off and put all the money back in my buildings, $700,000, and then got behind on my payments. So I sold one of the buildings, and when I sold it for 500 grand, and I only owed 900 to the bank, I said, "Hey, I'll give you guys 400. I'll keep 100, get current on my loans. We'll renegotiate and move forward." And they said, "Sure." 2 days before escrow closed, that bank went under, and they got taken over by another bank. And that other bank said, "Every penny from escrow comes to us, and you're still required to get current, and we're not changing the conditions of the loan." And I was like, "Wait a minute, I have over $250,000 in equity minimum in this property that I have, and you're telling me you're just going to take it?" And so I had buyers for it, and the bank said, "Nope, it's not good enough. We're not going to release it unless you close in 20 days." And I was like, I don't. So in 2011, I filed bankruptcy to stop the bank from taking my property. Went to the bankruptcy court, sold the two I had buyers, everything. Sold the two buildings, and then waited 2 years for the bankruptcy trustee to figure out how she could keep 70,000 of that money for herself, which she did, and then paid off people. So
Did you have to change your lifestyle during this time? Was this like a big effect on your life, or was it just like you sort of had you're just dealing with the stress of the whole situation?
well, we had borrowed some money from a friend, 150 grand, and I was obliged to her. The credit cards and all that, I was, credit cards. I don't care about them, but they got a percentage of the money, and then her, I still owed 80,000. So we've been paying her off since 2011 when it closed, and we're almost done paying her off. But that was, once that's paid off, and I'll feel like that whole chapter's done. But really, it went from it was unique. It's really easy when you're making money to be in a good mood.
Right.
So I thought everything was going great. I had everything going for me. And then all of a sudden, I'm driving to a gas station and I'm using quarters to pay for gas. And I'm realizing, how far I had fallen. That was like a moment for me when I was like, Rob, you're not that special. And in a way, here's a fine. Well, going back farther in my life, I got sober when I was 15 years old in AA. And I spent a year and a half in a recovery house for drug addiction and alcoholism. And in that recovery house, every single day I had to write my feelings down and read them to my sponsor. And my sponsor would tear me apart every time I was selfish or self focused or anything. So I learned to really be self honest with myself. And so I always look for ways to belittle myself, like telling people I went bankrupt. I don't have a problem telling people because my ego is my biggest fear. That's what's going to get me loaded again is being full of myself. So I'm really good at being self-deprecating because I recognize that if you're not recognizing that, but for the grace of God, there go I on anybody. There is no judgment on other people's lives, and um, I really honestly feel that um, I have had a good run, and this was all during this time. You know, as a Christian, I used to actually struggle. I told a friend of mine, this was kind of fortuitous, but I remember telling him at the golf course, I said, I have a lot of money right now. I think at the time I was worth a little over 2 million. And I said, part of me thinks I should be willing to pray and say, God, if this money gets between me and you, take it away. But I'm afraid God might take it away. So I don't want to pray, which means
Right.
that's exactly why I should be praying that, because if that's getting between me and God, and it's easy to be super spiritual when you got all your bills paid. But if you're struggling to pay your bills and you're really relying upon faith and um, belief in something other than yourself, it puts your faith to a test. And so, I feel like I came out better for it. I paid a lesson. The lesson is that I'm not a real estate investor. And I
Hmm.
understand a little bit better about why people with money aren't so as frivolous as I was and casual with their money. They're a little more careful, and I understand that now. So now, fast forward for about 3 or 4 years, because I auctioned off all my props, everything. That auction went horrible too. I had about $500,000 worth of material, went to auction, and I got $20,000 for all of it. Stuff was going out the door for $10 that I paid like 4 grand for. It was just like I was shocked. And I have this weekly poker game that I've been playing for, I don't know, 15 years now. And one of the guys is a lawyer, and I told him about it. He said, "Let me write a letter." So he wrote a letter and said, "You guys did this, this, and this wrong." And they were sending me another check for 20. So I got 42 grand total out of it. But that was another one. It was like, holy cow, man, could anything get worse? First, I lose everything. And then I get taken by a shyster auction company. And then, you know, but I kept back some lights, and that's all I kept was lights and my balloon stuff. And so I kept doing lighting and balloons for people, and I paid my bills. I didn't have any extra money. I still was struggling to get gas in my cars. I paid my bills, and I just kept trudging along and doing exactly that. I wasn't anticipating doing anything else. And then my son-in-law came to me and he said, "Hey, can you start Perfect Touch back up again? That's the company, and I'll come work with you, and we'll build it real big up, and then I'll buy it from you." And I was like,
Hmm.
you know what? One of the things I most regretted about my whole business was that the people who made me wealthy, all the workers I had who put in time, I never paid them what I felt like I could have paid them. I was paying them 15,
Hmm.
18, $20 an hour, but I could have been paying them 25, 30, $40 an hour and still made a good living. And I could have taken better care of those people. And so I didn't. So I thought, this would be an opportunity to build the business up and let them just take it over and let them, be self-sufficient and get all the joy of making a good living and doing this job. It's hard work, but it's rewarding and fun and makes money. So I started doing
Right.
that.
So, well, so it's interesting that at this sort of low point that you called back to this other low point in your life when you were 15 and you got sober. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit more about that because 15 sounds ridiculously young to be into alcohol.
Yeah.
How did you how did you get into that so young, and what brought you to the point where you were ready to get sober?
Well, obviously at 14, 13, 14, 15, you're not exactly, running the streets and shooting up every day. I was looking back and comparing myself, I was a very mild user, but I was all in with music. I mean, I couldn't do enough. I stole a beer every single day from my dad's beer fridge and hid it. When I'd get 7 of them, I'd trade in the warm ones for cold ones, go in the back by myself and drink them. It was everything I wanted to do was built around drugs and using. I mean, I was super smart in class in school, and I quit going to classes. I, I did, all I wanted to be was a stoner. That was my goal, and it developed into a point where I actually tried to kill myself when I was 14, just because, and I was taking downers and drinking at the time, so that obviously contributed to it. But there was always a suicidal thought in the back of my head that was becoming more and more overpowering. And I actually I committed a felony vandalism on my vice principal's plate glass window when I threw a trash can through it at school, and because it was over the dollar limit, it was a felony. So they said jail or recovery, and well, what idiot would say jail? So I went to recovery, and I was around 18 other people who were all heavier users than me, and in the AA program, you talk about feelings. You're always discussing what's going on. And I had a lot of people who were brutally honest with me and forced me to talk about things and talk about suicidal thoughts and where I was going with stuff. And it was more a case of seeing the path I was going and realizing that path was self-destructive. It was just all cumulative of the self-destructive streak I had. And um, getting sober meant having a new life. And so I decided to kind of try it as a trial. So I'm sober now. I was up there for 16 months, and a lot of it became, I'm 15 years old. I'm just a young kid, doesn't know nothing, and I'm hanging out with all these older people. And some of it is I want their approval, so being sober with them. But the funny thing is, I look back. I have three friends. Well, I'm sorry, two friends. One of them died a while ago. I have two friends that I met during there. One of them's one of my best friends. He was in my wedding. Actually, all three of these guys were in my wedding. But one of them, Scott, I talk to all the time, and we've been sober together since then. And what is it, 30 something years? 81, 35 years now. And I honestly don't care if I'm an alcoholic or a drug addict or if I was just in a phase. I was young. I just don't have any desire to risk it. I mean, my life is so good, and I see drinking and drugs, and I look at the people, and I think there's nothing there that I want, you know. And I don't have it. I hang out with people who drink all the time, and it doesn't bother me. I don't have any desire, I'm totally not part of that life, and it's acceptable to me.
What was the role of that religion played in your getting sober? And what was your relationship with religion before this point in time, and how did it change
So
as a
my
result of
parents
this?
were Catholic when I was a child, and I got confirmed. And then my mother was ultra liberal. She makes liberals look liberal or look conservative. She was a member of NOW while we were living in farmland in Ohio, right? So we're talking feminist. I read Now magazine for most of my childhood. So I'm very, hip on that whole scene. And I, I'm an embarrassment to them now. I'm the only one that's super conservative. And so my mother says I'm the black sheep of the family. But it, it, it was sometime after, I think, Kennedy getting shot, that my mother decided she hated guns. And so we got rid of all the guns we owned. And now, mind you, we live on a farm, and having guns on a farm is normal. But we got rid of all the guns when Kennedy got shot, and then we started having, or my mother was having more and more liberal political leanings. My dad, at the meantime, works for the defense industry. He's a logistics engineer for ICBMs for the Air Force. So he's a big war supplier, money. And he was for Nixon, and my mother was a McGovern fan. So eventually, my father actually turned super liberal based on his disgust with the spending in the military complex, which I understand, and I can sympathize with the position. I think we've gone down a rabbit hole we can't come out of. Our economy you know, is if we quit the military industrial complex too quickly, we would literally throw millions of people out of work who are making great livings, and the economy would just collapse. So whether we like it or not, this is who we are. And I can agree we don't need $13 billion aircraft carriers that can be sunk with 4 or 5 $25,000 anti-ship weapons. But what are you going to do? I mean, what?
And they were both Catholic.
Well, no, they were Catholic in name only, and then they quit. They quit going to church when I was about. What year do you get confirmed? What is that, like 6 or 7?
You're asking the wrong guy.
Yeah, I don't know, somewhere around there. I got confirmed, never went to church again. So I had no religion whatsoever in my life. I remember one time we were stoned and I was with a buddy and I started saying F God, and he was going, man, you can't say that. I'm like, I saw that it scared him, so I was saying it louder and screaming it. I just didn't have any, any connection whatsoever to any religion. So I get sober, and they talk about, in AA, a higher power greater than yourself. And, it's pretty much God, obviously, but they try to leave it super nebulous so that if somebody wants to be an atheist, they can be, which, whatever. And it was after about 6 years of being sober that I was living with this guy, a buddy of mine, Eddie, and he was going through a divorce, and he would get the Bible and he would open it up and he'd read chapters about how God hated divorce, and he'd say, listen to this, and he'd read this, and I'd be like, Eddie, I don't care. And so he would leave this Bible out. And so I've always been a guy who reads nonstop. I read at least 2 books a week. It doesn't matter. Right now I'm in a science fiction kick and I'm reading all this hard science fiction, but biography and just whatever it is, I'm always reading. And it's funny because I know words that I don't know how to pronounce, but I see them all the time, and I'll be like, I embarrassed myself once when I tried to say hyperbole instead of hyperbole. So now I just say hyperbole because that's how it's spelled, darn it. But
I like that.
Yeah, so I'm reading the Bible on my own. No one's around me, no influences whatsoever, and I'm just reading it out of curiosity. What's this whole thing? I've never read it. I don't know anything about it. So I'm reading this, and I remember thinking, well, here's something funny. When I tried to kill myself, I drank a bunch of paint thinner, and which incidentally, don't do that to kill yourself. It doesn't work as well as you think. It does pass out of you through your rectum at night while you're sleeping. So my bed smelled like paint thinner, but yeah, very weird. And I remember in the morning, I was feeling so bad. And everybody, when you've got that hangover, when you just feel like crap, you say, God, if you take this away, I'll read the Bible. I'll listen. So anyway, so I said that, and I get the old big family Bible out that was there, and I start reading in Genesis, and I think I got 3 chapters in. I go, this is boring, and I closed it, and I never opened the Bible again until my buddy's going through this divorce. And he was in the New Testament. I never read the New Testament. So I'm starting to read this whole story about who Jesus is, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I'm understanding all these, little things that people say about Jesus. I didn't know anything about it. And so I'm liking the story. I'm liking the concept behind forgiveness. And remember, I came from AA where you were flawed, and recognizing your flaw is what gives you strength. If you don't recognize your flaw, you live in denial and you keep yourself in that hole that you've dug. And so I'm reading the Bible, and I'm totally accepting the fact, yes, I'm a sinner. I've committed sins. I mean, who doesn't? Give me a girl, I'll commit every sin I could. And so I'm reading the Bible, and I start saying to myself, this would be kind of cool to be into, but I don't know anything about it. My buddy, he says to me, hey, you want to go to this church with me? And I go, now mind you, this dude's a heroin addict who I knew from the recovery, and he's going through a divorce because he had started using coke again, and he was shooting coke. I mean, he went from sober for 3 or 4 years to shooting coke again. And then he got sober again, and we moved in. We bought a house together, and he's telling me about this, go to this Bible church. And I'm like, well, why? And he goes, well, that's where all the hot girls go. And I'm like, I'm desperate, dude. Girls don't seem to find me attractive. And so I'm like, oh, hot girls, let's go. Literally, that's the reason I went to this church. And so I go to this church and I listen to the sermon, and afterwards, I said to this guy, I grabbed this guy and I go, it's funny because he turned out to be a really good friend. I said, hey, how do you become a Christian? And he was like taken back, right? Because in the Christian world, it's your job to convert people, right? So you're supposed to learn all these things to say and how to quote the Bible, and you're going to do all this stuff, and it's going to turn people's mind. And then here's a guy coming up to him going, "How do you do this stuff?" And he was like, It hilarious looking back at it. He grabbed someone else, and they told me all this stuff, and none of it was registering with me. So I went home, and I was in the shower, and I said, God, if you're real, show yourself to me, and I'll believe in you. And I said, I know that's kind of phone, it's not a really cool way to say it, but if you're real, show yourself to me and I'll believe in you. So the next day, we got a book in the mail, and it said Steps to Christ, and it was addressed to occupant. And I was like, wow, that's just a coincidence. The next day, a pastor knocks on our door and says, hey, the person who used to live here donated some money to my church, and I don't know why, because he never went to my church. And it's been about a month, but I was coming to find out why. And I said, we just bought the house a couple weeks ago, so I don't know who he is. But I'm laughing, right? And he's like thinking I'm a weirdo. So he leaves. A couple days later, my buddy who I'm living with, his brother is a missionary in Thailand. He's been a missionary for 3 years in Thailand, decides to take a sabbatical for the first time in 3 years, and come visit his brother for 2 weeks. So his brother comes and lives with us for 2 weeks, and I just pumped him full every question I could about everything about the Bible. What's this? What's that? And I decided, you know what? If this isn't showing to me, then what is? What am I expecting? A big giant sign that says, "Hey, Rob, this is God." So I started believing, but I was always scared I was in a cult, because cults are real. So I started reading all the books I can on comparative religions. Walter Smith, he wrote a great book called The Kingdom of the Cults, and it goes through why Mormonism is a cult and what it's about, and what Jehovah's Witnesses believe, and what Seventh-day Adventist, and what Baha'i faith, and what, all these different faiths. And I read about all those. Then I was reading books about other people, and okay, and my wife's trying to get my attention. She loves me. And so reading all those books, oh, my granddaughter's on the other side of this door. She can't go to sleep with me yelling. So I have to speak quieter. My daughter just sold her house, and so they just moved in with us. Yay.
I see.
My granddaughter's 8, though. She's awesome. I brought her in and out tonight. So
Yeah. I think I met her.
You met Haley, yeah. When you,
yeah, my daughter's the same age. She's 8 now, too. It's
a great age, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
I missed out because I was working so much. And now that I know I spend a lot more time with my grandkids. Well, actually, my oldest granddaughter's husband is working for me. So my grandson-in-law works for me now. So that doesn't make you feel old.
Wait, let me get you back on track. You were saying that the guy who was a missionary in Thailand came to live with you.
Yeah.
And it seemed like you were like taking all these efforts to. It's an interesting thing. It seems like you're trying to get into religion, right. And you're seeking out all these resources for how to do it.
Yes, I was trying for it to be real. I wanted it to be real. I recognized that, anytime that you have a preconceived desire and then you approach something, you're obviously going to find everything that fits with what you want. So that's why I started reading about other religions to find out, wait a minute, am I in a religion that's actually viable, or am I in the one that's screwed up? And it was reading about things like, for instance, in Jehovah's Witnesses, they teach that you're not supposed to read the Bible. You're not supposed to read the other things. You're supposed to read about Jehovah's Witnesses. And they have a list of books they don't want you to read. Same with Mormonism. Don't read Walter Smith. Anyway, after I got into religion, I started to go on the forums. This was back in the early, this was 87 when I got saved. And the forums were, message boards were it, similar to a forum, but was more of a message board. And with message boards, you can think a long time and write what you're going to spell out and go back and change it. And then when you post it, you put something up there. And so I was arguing religion with people, and like I did a little bit on FCP, but I was more, arguing evolution and creationism and things like that. And it forced me to learn about things. And so I was reading more and more books. Now, mind you, obviously written from a Christian perspective, but I read about people who were old age creationists, believe that the universe is 4 billion years old or 6 billion or whatever it is today. And then also reading people that were believers that the earth is 6,000 years old.
And who did you find more convincing on that point?
Well, on some things, I'm a panocrat. Everything's going to pan out. I don't really have to worry about it. If I believe that the earth is 6 billion years old and I'm wrong, doesn't change my faith in God. If I believe the earth is 6,000 years old and I'm wrong, doesn't change my faith in God. Those things are reasonable. Reasonable men have reasonable arguments for an old earth and for a young earth. And I postulated one time somebody that if we went back in the time machine to day 7 of creation, I'm sorry, day 8, because you can't work on the 7th day. So on day 8 of creation, I went back there and I brought a geologist and a biologist and a astrophysicist. Every one of them, using scientific methods, would prove to me that the Earth is millions or thousands or hundreds of years old. And every one of them would be wrong using science. Because what does a universe look like if God creates it? Does it have to be brand new and still have tags at the bottom of the rocks? Or does it look like, obviously if he wants a stream, it's got to have sides that look like they eroded. If he wants a mountain, it's got to look like it rose from the tectonic plate shift.
Well, no, it doesn't. I mean, look, you're talking about an omniscient creature. He could. There's no reason if you're creating a world, you have to make it look old, right?
Well,
I mean, is it because he's looking for a tenant that wanted an old world? He could have made a brand new one.
Right. Okay. So let's say he makes a star and it's 200 million light years away. Does he say, okay, you guys aren't going to see this for 200 million years? Or does he say, hey, I made this star. I want you to see it now. So I'm going to make the light waves that go from that star to your eyeballs. So from science, it's 200 million light years away. So it's got to be 200 million years old. But that's not the way it was. And was he trying to deceive, or is he just making a star that he wanted you to see? So I love art.
Yeah, I mean that
I don't like Long Live York. He was too good.
I mean, it just seems kind of convoluted if you're trying to decide how old the world is, to say like, well, it could be as old as it looks, or it could be newer and made to look older. Yeah, that's maybe that's true, but why would you choose the more complicated version of things, that it was newer but made to look older, when it could just be older?
Occam razor, right? The simplest answer. Well, here's the other thing.
Yeah.
Let's say you cut into a tree and there's one ring, but this tree is a redwood and it's 200 feet high, and you're like, it can't be 1 year old. So something else has to be there, because you approach it with the idea that this has to be 200 years old. So you just change science. That's what.
Well, no, you don't. You don't start with an assumption that's exactly what isn't science is. By if you're trying to determine how old the tree is, you don't start with the assumption that it's 200 years old and then reason back to why. You try to find evidence of its age. Now, you're saying that when you look at this tree, it looks tall and therefore it has to be old. So that you're saying that the height of the tree is some evidence of its age, and you can gather other evidence of its age, but we wouldn't start with some kind of assumption and work backwards. That wouldn't be science.
Okay. Well, science is made of scientists. Scientists are people. People have agendas as well. Global warming is a good example. There are people who have an agenda to not have global warming be true. So they find, and there are people in the reverse.
I mean, really what science is our best set of procedures to get at the truth given the fact that we all have agendas. If we
I
if
agree with
we
you.
if we
100%. I agree with
didn't care that we had agendas, we would just, believe whatever bias things we wanted to. But the whole reason we have procedures to try to remove those bias by making repeated observations and making them carefully and verifying them from other perspectives and from other people is because we know those biases are there and we try to work around them in the best way possible. And it's really, and science is certainly not perfect, but I don't know of a better way. If there is a better way to determine the truth, then that's basically that other way is also
you.
science.
Yeah, I mean, an agendaless science would be wonderful. I agree with you. I just don't have a lot of faith into just because it's, I mean, you say we don't go into it, but we know the Earth is this old. Therefore, when we go and dig, we know that the fossils that are 10 feet down are this age because of the rocks that they're around, the strata. And then the geologists say we know how old the strata is because there's fossils in it, and those are trace fossils, and they determine the age of the strata. I mean, there is circular reasoning, there is flaws, and it's not. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there's a flaw. There's flawed because people have an agenda to try to drive something to prove something. I mean, some people do, obviously, but in general, I don't think it's unreasonable for scientists to look at things and say the Earth is old. I'm just saying that it, it's not um, it's not the end answer to me. I'm very comfortable with the idea that the Earth is not old. And it's funny, I have a relative who's a Catholic. I mean, a real Catholic, not one of those who goes to church on Easter. And well, I mean, he actually goes to church and raises his kids and everything. And he we were at his country club in Seattle, and I mentioned that I kind of think the Earth is young, and he said, "I'm so embarrassed for you." He just went on and on about how you can't just don't say another word. I don't want you to embarrass yourself. That's the stupidest thing. He was going on and on. I'm sitting there listening to him, going, "Wow." I mean, I understand the desire to say that you believe something, but I look for people who have a different view than mine. I want people to challenge me all the time. I enjoy conversations with you or with anyone else who doesn't believe what I believe, because, who wants to sit around and just have everyone say, yeah, I think this is true too. I mean, that's just, you're never going to expand your own mind. You're never going to grow. And
Yeah, I think you're right. But that to bring that back to what you were saying about your initial search into religion, you were saying that when you looked at some of these other religions, they appeared to be restricting the kind of contact people would have with information. So they were saying not to read certain books, and it seemed like you were leading up to saying that you felt more comfortable with Christianity because they weren't telling you not to look in a certain
right,
place.
there's no,
Is that right?
being in a non-denominational, you're not a centralized authority that dictates things. I mean, the Catholic Church for a long time did try to control movies and other things back in the 50s, and basically we know where the Catholic Church is today, and what you get when you have man in charge of anything, a large power structure. You're just going to have corruption. But and I've gone to many churches where I've had to leave because the pastor is having an affair or whatever. I mean, we're all flawed and we all fail, but it doesn't change the fact that the Bible says, God said in the Old Testament, He talks about, ask me, challenge me. If you have a question about something, get it. And I did that for many years. I'd be reading the Bible and I'd ask a question of God. And it was weird how often I'd go to church the next, Wednesday or Sunday, and that would be the topic of the subject. And he'd be talking about that and both sides of it and everything. I mean, that was happening so often that I got to expect it. I could literally be reading the Bible, get to a point where I didn't understand something, and I'd tell God, "Hey, I don't understand this. Could you explain this to me?" And the next time I go to church, it would happen. He'd be talking about that, and it was. I mean, experiential knowledge is obviously only good for me. It's not something that I can say, Jonas, you have to believe because this happened to me, because you weren't there. You have a reasonable amount of intelligence on your own to not, to find alternative views of what happened. So, but for me, my own experience, the constant answering of prayers to me was a significant impact on my life.
So let me just stop you there because you said this is interesting. You said that you think I have, some intelligence to come up with alternate explanations of what happened, but I think you do too. And one of the things you were saying when you were talking about um, when you were at the gas station and you only had a few quarters, and you had learned early in your life to be sort of honest with yourself. Do you not also go through those alternate explanations? Like when you have a feeling that you're saying something to God and then he's responding in some way, do do you do you think about the alternate explanations and reject them, or do you not even
There's a
think about them?
school of thought in the church of, we used to call it the name it and claim it, that God wants you to be wealthy and happy and everything go great in your life. And from the beginning of my faith, the people I go to church, the pastors that teach me, they've always taught that being a Christian means suffering. The entire collection of 12 apostles all died horrible, penniless deaths for their faith. So over and over again, it talks about the suffering for God, to share in Christ's suffering on the cross. And so I'm not I'm not willing to argue that, good things come from God and bad things come from the devil. But I believe that God allows us to go through trials in order to grow as humans, because growing and becoming better, that's that's really the only struggle in life that we all share. Atheists, Christians, agnostics. It's struggling with your own beliefs and beliefs that are presented to you and trying to grow. And if you're not growing, well, then obviously you're a dogmatic individual who has no desire to expand your mind, and that's fine. I mean, some people are happy being bowlers. They want to go bowling for the rest of their life and work as security guards. I mean, there's nothing wrong with his life. I happen to know a guy like that. That's why it always struck me as he was content to be a guard, and because he just liked to go bowling, and he did have two nickels rubbed together, but that was his life. And I remember thinking at the time, I would be so unsatisfied with that life, but he's happy. So who am I to say that you're wrong? I mean, for him, it was perfect. Um, so
So do you think of these? How does what you're saying now relate to the question of whether you consider the alternative explanations of your experience of talking to God?
um, you know, I guess I would be lying if I said every time anything happens, my first thought is, okay, is this or is this that, or like I said, I wanted to believe. I have no doubt about that. Now, the biblical argument is that God puts a calling in your life to come to Him, and so that calling gives you the desire. And even with all my desire and all my intelligence and all my reading, none of it's relevant to the fact that I'm a sinner and that Jesus died on the cross. And the only way I can get to heaven is to accept his dying on the cross for me. And that's it. There's nothing else to it. I mean, all the rest of it is just fluff. So when you look at it from that perspective,
Why is that? This is one of the things that's the strangest to me about this form of Christianity, because to me, the things that if I'm trying to find the things in Christianity that seem valuable, and you've said lots of things that seem valuable from what you've learned from it, things about the value of forgiveness, or how you can learn things through challenges in your life, and just even having a sense of being good. To me, those seem like they should be the important things. Why does having this particular belief about some dude dying have anything to do with anything?
I, uh, okay, I mean, that is a central core of all Christianity. I mean, that is in this book, Kingdom of the Cults, that was, the Nicene Creed, which is the statement of belief that these are the beliefs that we have. This is a foundational belief. This is a belief that doesn't change. For instance, for a Democrat, the foundational belief is that the government is there to help people. Now, whether that's a flawed thought, it doesn't matter. That's your core beliefs start. And then from there, you build off onto social programs and taxes and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, but that's a core belief. Core belief in Christianity is that you are a sinner, only saved because of nothing you've done. You didn't even earn the right to ask God. He even gave you that grace because he wanted to, for no other reason than he wanted to. Once you accept that, and it ties in with AA, you're acknowledging I'm a flawed human being, and this person, God, is offering me redemption for no reason other than he loves me. And so, if that's the core of my belief, where do I get to build a I'm better than you, or I have a right to judge you, or I have power over you? None of those things can come from that belief, but they do come from church. They come from many religions. Christianity is one of them. Now that I'm saved, I get the right to tell homosexuals why they're going to hell. That's not relevant at all in the sense that God gave us not only the way to get to heaven, but he gave me the desire to even ask for it. And then he gave it to me for no reason whatsoever, knowing even when he gave it to me that I was still going to screw things up for the next 20 or 30 years. I wasn't going to be a great Christian. I mean, I have my, go on the boards. Everybody, half the people there will tell you a million flaws I have, and I have them.
So do you think that somebody who doesn't believe that basic foundational belief about Jesus dying, let's say I found somebody who didn't believe that Jesus was that he
Right.
supernaturally came back to life, still believed everything else, but can that be a moral person? So can someone who doesn't believe in that live a moral life?
Here's the way I see it. I mean, it's a lot like almost everything, especially in politics. Everyone gets to say that this is Trump's economy. And other people say, no, this is the end result of Obama's policies. Well, here's the reality. Unless Obama didn't pass those policies, we can't tell what's true. Is it Trump doing these things and making the economy great? Is it Obama's last year in office that he made all these sudden changes he didn't do for the first 7 years, and that made the economy great? Or is it irrelevant totally to the, being in this position now, we can't go back and say, if this had been different, then this would be different. I mean, we can say that, but we don't have any value to that truth. So a person who says, I believe that it's wrong to kill, can be a moral person in the sense of murder, but if his belief in that is one of, because I just think it's wrong, well, then there's no reason that I can't argue that I have just the same belief that it's okay to kill someone, because
But there are ways of grounding. So morality can be come from an authority like a god, like the way that you're describing it. But when it doesn't mean that there's no reasons for it or that it's just open to anyone's interpretation. I mean, really, what these moral systems are about is what's the best way for us all to live together in a way that allows us all to experience positive things and to be productive and to flourish, basically. That's what morality comes down to. And if there are certain rules that don't work towards those purposes, we can objectively say those aren't good rules. And like not murdering is one we all pretty much agree on, because nobody wants to live in a world where anyone can be murdered, and we've basically tried out that world, and it's just not as good as the one where we don't kill each other. So there, you can have a basis for moral rules that doesn't.
Sam Harris got himself in trouble with the other atheists in the world when he tried to say that morality evolved from, like, just as you described, from society growing and evolving, and that's how morality came about. But think about this. Right now we have a constitution, and that constitution tells us this is the way it is. Right now, that's an outside authority to our way of life. Now, we have had times in our country's existence with that same constitution where slavery was legal. And then we said, no, slavery is not. And we had changed the constitution. So was slavery moral when it was constitutionally allowed on?
No, this is a good point, because the whole point is that an authority can be wrong, right? The slavery wasn't right because slavery isn't right or wrong because the Constitution says that it is. It's wrong because it produces a lot of suffering, and because the world in which slavery is legal is not as good as the one where slavery is illegal, and we adjust our rules in our Constitution to follow that. It would be nice if we could adjust the Bible in the same way, that when we determine that stoning isn't really the best way to enact justice, that we go in there and edit it. I mean, that's the one thing that is the most annoying about the Bible, is that it can't be edited.
You've been to a good stoning,
huh? I'm sure they were very excited
with your argument. Right now, the majority of the world believes that women are less than men. The majority of the world. So from a morality standpoint, it's moral for women to be just above property.
No, it isn't.
No,
those people are wrong.
But if 2 billion...
Just because people believe it's moral doesn't make it moral.
It exactly does, according to you. Morality is based on consensus society.
No. Morality is based on what's actually good for people. Now, society can be good at determining what that is, or you can have societies that are bad at determining what that is. And we certainly, with respect to how women are treated, we have different societies that are closer to moral right now than other societies, right? Like, our society isn't perfect, but we do a lot better than Saudi Arabia does with respect to how women are treated. And that's because we have a better system of morality.
Yeah, see, I think you're cherry picking here. You get to argue that, but once you say that society has determined that not murdering is a better way to live, then what you're saying is majority rules on morality.
No. I'm saying we can be right or wrong. In any given moment, we have to decide what we think our best guess is. But it's the same thing with science. You have to allow it to be open to revision as you learn more. We don't treat people with leeches very often anymore because we have better ways of doing it. We improve our medical system. We improve our moral system over time. That's why we don't have slavery anymore. It doesn't mean that the current system is a fixed representation of the best way morality could be. It's just the best that we can do right now, given the constraints of the way democracies work. There's certainly a lot of things that we have wrong, obviously. But whether what the current laws are doesn't determine what's moral. It just determines what we currently think is moral. That's
right. So given that, then it is possible for slavery to become moral again, because it is a consensus based on society. So if society says that redheaded people should be slaves, you and I understand from two different worldviews, we understand why that's wrong. But if the majority of people believe that, we can be in that system and think it's wrong, and it's still the law, and it's still moral, and still people do it.
Well, it'll be the law, but it won't actually be moral. I mean, that would be a case in which there are immoral laws enacted, and there are plenty of cases like that. I mean, it isn't moral just because there's a consensus that it is. You're right that we could come to a point in our history where we determine that we're currently wrong about slavery, and slavery should be legal, and the world where slavery is legal is a better world. I don't think that's going to happen. In the same way, I don't think we're going to find out that gravity makes things fall up. I mean, we have enough evidence now that slavery is bad that it's a pretty good conclusion that we're correct on that one. Yeah. Except maybe with respect to redheaded people.
At least we're clear that there's some people.
Yes. Now let me transition a little bit, because I mean you're known for being wrong about a lot of different things. Yeah, but the thing that's most amazing thing that you're wrong about is this Trump thing. So I want to transition to how you can, given all the things you said about morality and how core beliefs sort of flow down into a person's life, and how you left a church because the pastor had an affair. How can you support this man who appears to be, to all evidence, one of the most immoral people ever created by Western society?
One of the most. It amazes me. We suddenly, it was like all of a sudden in 2016, we decided that politicians don't lie. And if a politician lies, well, that's just the worst thing ever. I mean, it's shocking to me.
Well, politicians lie all the time, but if you don't think there's something special about his relationship to the truth, then I mean, we should probably discuss that because to me, he certainly doesn't seem to be lying in the way that politicians typically lie. I mean, he's got something so far beyond that where it doesn't seem that he actually believes anything. He just says in any given moment what he thinks brings him the most utility, right? I mean, it's an extreme
He's acting
form
like a politician.
of lying that no, he isn't. He's acting like a sociopath. I
Literally
mean, politicians
care about themselves. They go in hundredaires, Republican, Democrat, Independent. They come out millionaires. They care about themselves. That's all they care about. Almost every one of them.
And you think that his version of lying is just
Trump
typical
is a
politician lying?
bombastic guy. He likes to exaggerate. Everything is the best. You know, I read books about. There's a great book called "Who's Your Caddy?" And this guy caddied for a bunch of different people, and he caddied for Trump. And Trump took him to his place. And he's like, "You got to try these hamburgers. They're the best in the country. I hired this chef. He's the best in the country. Everything. See this wall over here? We just had this built. It's the best wall that's ever been." He literally, that's the way he is. Okay, so you know that going in, he's a bombastic guy who's full of himself. Okay,
Sure.
He loves his country. I believe that. I believe he loves his country. He's doing everything he can in our trade deals and everything to get the best deal.
You mean, wait, are you talking about Russia now, or are you talking about the U.S.?
Do you think
When you say he loves his country, I'm just trying
Trump
to
is
clarify.
in any way associated with Russia?
I think that I don't know to what extent. I was mostly making a joke, but I think he probably has financial interests in that. He has so many financial interests in so many different things that it's very hard to tell what his motivations are. He's clearly motivated in how he deals with other countries and everyone else by what brings him the most profit.
Okay, so let's take that and say that that's true. The Trump's only in this for himself. So when he goes and does a trade deal with China, and he gets the best deal for American companies and American salespeople and American farmers that he can get, and then he's going to also profit from this, who else profits from that? American companies, American farmers, American.
Yeah, well, the problem is like when you are self-interested like that, there are times when your self-interest aligns with the greater interest. So, for example, if he wants to be seen as the guy who made a great deal with China, then he's going to make a deal with China that could then benefit us. So that's right. The problem with having someone who's self-interest is that, well, sometimes their interests will align with the interests of the country. It won't always, and you can't always tell when someone is acting one way or the other, right? So if he won't say anything bad about Vladimir Putin. Is that because he's trying to help us have a better relationship with Russia, or is it because he doesn't want to endanger his own financial deals?
Well,
how do we know the difference? And is that the kind of conflict of interest you would want?
So
somebody
here's
in
the deal
charge
with
to have?
Russians. Russians are violent when they come to spending money. They spend money like it's a game, it's a challenge to them to spend it. I was actually in Prague. I had bought this thing at a silent auction back when I had money, and I was in Prague for a week, and I was getting toured by the city by one of the princes of Czech Republic. Right, he owns one of the castles in the castle in Old City, and cool dude. Right, he's actually he works for a living. Okay, so even though he's a prince, he works for a living. He has a magazine that caters to the wealthy in Europe. He says most of his magazine target is to Russians because they spend money violently, he said. So Russia was oil rich, and they're getting all this money, and they broke up the communism, and then a bunch of guys took over industries, and they became billionaires, and they spend money like nuts, and they're just dumping money everywhere. They loan money to Trump, they loan money to every other builder. They're doing it. Now China's doing the same thing. China's coming over here and they're buying and spending money because they're trying to get their money away from the communist system, right? So they're violently spending their money in the system. So they're doing it completely irrelevantly I mean, who in the world thought Donald Trump was going to be president 5 weeks before the election, right? Someone asked me to bet $100 on it and I wouldn't take the bet. So nobody thought he was going to be president. So to argue now that the Russians had a ulterior motive to align themselves and get Trump into their hooks because he was going to become president would require such a huge leap of faith that it's totally irrelevant. So did he borrow money from Russians? Probably. I don't know. Did he borrow money from the Bank of Suisse? does Swiss Bank own, Trump?
Do you believe that the
No,
Russians tried to interfere with the election?
no. That
You
the
don't.
the Facebook thing, what they do? Like there was 13 guys that Mueller put a hit on. He filed that he was going to bust them for interfering. Their lawyer a couple weeks ago came out and says, "Good, let's go to court." And now Mueller's saying, "No, I'm not ready for court." And the judge said, "Get your case ready because you're going to court now." Mueller had carte
So I mean, it's been the opinion of the entire intelligence community that they did try to interfere with the election in order to help Trump. So do you just think they're wrong, or it's just some sort of conspiracy theory where they're trying to discredit Trump? I mean, what is that? Why
You know
would
that
the intelligence community
95%
say
of
that?
intelligence communities in the world said that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. 95% of them. Every one of them in the Middle East, ours, England's, France, Russians, everyone said he had weapons of mass destruction. So to argue that they are the priority intelligence service and they can't get anything wrong, we just came out of
Well, no, it's not that they can't do anything wrong, but so it doesn't. So just because someone is infallible, it is
I'll
fallible
grant you
doesn't
that.
mean that they're wrong either, right? I mean, let me bring it back to Trump's ethics, because to me, of course, I don't expect politicians to be ethical people necessarily. They're not there because they're in the same position as the pastor of a church. But he does seem to be a particularly cruel and selfish individual, just from the interactions that he has with other people, and anyone who has a relationship with him eventually sort of gets thrown to the wayside in one way or another. He seems to be very his relationship and his treatment of women seems to be particularly bad. I mean, he's always cheating on his wives with porn stars and all that kind of stuff. And I realize, some guy who's living some rich life where he wants to do that. Of course, that happens all the time. But to elevate someone like that, who seems to have some real ethical challenges, to the position of leadership that he's in, to me seems really, really problematic. Do you see any problem with that, or do you not see him as someone who's ethically challenged?
Let me put it this way. I remember I was talking to an older movie star, right? This is a guy who used to be an NFL player, and he became a movie star. And we were at a golf tournament together, and he was holding court before the golf tournament, and he was telling these stories, and I was one of the guys listening. So it's not like we were buddies, but he was telling about how when he was starring in a movie, he would have a guy come to his house and pick him up every morning. He'd have a Danish in the newspaper for him. He'd drive him to the set. They'd have a trailer for him and a masseuse. They'd give him a menu, and he'd order his lunch and his dinner, everything. They'd come and say, "Hey, Mr. So-and-so, we need you to come over here and do this. Hey, Mr. So-and-so, can you do, hey, Mr. So-and-so." He says it was nonstop like that for 2 months. He goes, then one day, I wake up in the morning and there's no car there. There's no Danish there, and there's no coffee. And I go through withdrawals. I'm so used to being pampered nonstop that suddenly I don't have that. And I go through these withdrawals, and I got to get back to that. So I do everything I can to get in another movie. So when I see movie stars like Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt, and I hear he's sleeping with 1 million women, I don't think to myself, what an unethical guy. I think, how would I react if every time I walked down the street, a woman said, "Can I give you a blowjob?" How could I how can I judge a guy who's literally having women throw themselves at him nonstop? I mean, would I be able to do that? And so, it gets back to a lot about my own belief. But for the grace of God, go I. I don't have any right to judge somebody who is in a position. So I do these parties at these country clubs here where there's billionaires, okay? I did a wedding for a billionaire. He put it on 2 weeks before he got married. And he spent 16 grand with me doing lights. He spent 50 grand to cover his pool with Lucite. Nothing. I mean, this guy was literally, there was no dollar amount he cared about because he's a billionaire, right? So I've done parties for these guys where they have strippers come and model lingerie for them so that they can buy lingerie for their wife, in air quotes, and then afterwards they take these strippers home. And some of these billionaires and some of these multimillionaires, they have casitas, and their wives say, if you're going to sleep with someone, sleep in that casita with them. Don't bring them in my house. That's the way it works. So It's a life. It's a world.
Yeah, no, look, I understand that, and, I think, who among us hasn't slept with 10 to 12 strippers at a time when we were flush with money? I totally get that, and maybe you say you don't have the right to judge him, but you do have the right to choose who you want to be your leader, and you don't need to take a guy like that. There are plenty of people who don't live like that,
Right.
right? I
No,
mean,
there
he's
was,
not
there was
he's not
two
the only
choices.
choice. There are people
Who,
who
in
seem like
reality, there was
people
two
who are
choices. If they had if the Democrats had put up somebody who wasn't as completely flawed as Hillary, Trump probably wouldn't be president.
I agree with that, but, like, let's say they put someone up now who isn't Hillary Clinton, who seems like just like a regular politician is probably what's gonna happen. You've got a regular politician, you've got Trump, who's someone who really has been living this lifestyle where he's clearly not an example for the rest of us of how to live. I mean, isn't it better for us if we put somebody in that position
No,
who is an
I
example of
don't
how
have
to
a
live?
problem arguing that Trump is a flawed person who you should never emulate. I don't have a problem saying that Trump is not the best choice that there is. But to argue that Trump is evil, therefore everything that he's doing is evil, is first you have to make the case that his evilness is actually who he is versus he's a guy who loves his country and he's also a flawed human being who's full of himself. I don't have a problem with him being full of himself. And when people come after him, he goes back after them harder. I don't have a problem with that. That's, if someone comes after him, he goes back. I mean, why is that so? And the truth is, I listen to Rush Limbaugh. Rush Limbaugh is the only talk show guy I listen to anymore because everyone else drives me insane. And sometimes Michael Savage because he's so crazy that it's fun. But Rush Limbaugh. And he was talking about this the other day. And he said, Republicans are supposed to bow down when there's any criticism. That's what has happened for the last 40 years. Every time something comes up, Republicans, oh, we're sorry, and we quit. A good example was the Speaker of the House, who said one off the cuff remark about Strom Thurmond, and suddenly he had to resign as Speaker of the House because all he said was, when this guy's retiring, hey, you would have been a great president when you ran. Oh, but he ran as a segregationist, therefore you hate blacks. No, he was just saying something nice about an old guy. But Republicans are supposed to just bow down. Right now, the Republican Party is a fractured, flawed system where half the people in it are going, we don't want to have any negative things at all said about us, so we get invited to parties. And the other half is saying, you know what? Trump's shown us that if they come after us, we can go after them. So I kind of like it.
Yeah, I can understand that, and I don't have any problem with that aspect of him per se. I just see him. You're saying he's full of himself, and I think that's maybe a charitable way of describing it. I mean, to me, it seems like a very extreme. As a psychologist, it seems like a extreme form of narcissism to me. And I guess from and talking to someone like you, I've been a little bit just. It's one of the things that disappoints me about it is that he seems like so unethical that I am just surprised that the Christians of the country either don't see it that way or are unwilling to
No, that's why
take
that's why
some kind of a stand on it.
that's why he grabbed Pence. I mean, that was his way of trying to get the Christian community to back him up. I mean, Pence is a solid Christian man who has a lot of morals, and he's going to be a great president after Trump's second term. So, you know,
Oh no!
who the Democrats got right now? Who's on the bench for the Democratic Party?
There's a lot of debate about that. It's a big field right now, so I don't really. There's no clear front runner. I mean, maybe Joe Biden. I mean, I think he's too old.
Yeah, plus the fact that the Me Too movement has made him damaged goods.
I can see why Christians would like Pence, obviously. I just can't see why they would support someone like Trump, because to me, it seems like ceding any kind of ethical authority you had. Not that they had that much, but after, especially after all the other stuff that goes on. But to just completely abdicate the the moral voice of the country by allowing him to do what he does without any kind of criticism, just to me seems like really surprising.
Well, I mean, think about the way you worded that. You're literally making the case that The Christians have just said we all support Trump without any criticism. Well, that's just not true.
Yeah,
There's plenty of criticism
isn't
of
it?
Trump,
Like what?
like he cheated on his wife, and that he lies a lot, and that he's bombastic and full of himself.
I don't hear Christians condemning him for that at all. I hear them helping him to cover it up and not shaming the women who come out and say it, and basically going along with his
Which
act.
woman got shamed? The one who filed a lawsuit and then lost the lawsuit, and now all the money she collected in GoFundMe is now going to go to pay to Trump's lawyer $650,000, which is just that's so delicious.
But see, you just did it. I mean, you took the side of the guy who was cheating on his wife with her, and relished in the shame that she experienced from losing her lawsuit. I just that to me is not criticizing him for the behavior. I mean, he's got nothing but apology and cover up from what I can see.
Okay, wait a minute.
From the Republicans.
But here's a woman who slept with a married man, so she's equally culpable. And then she said, "Give me."
Well, I don't know about that. That's an interesting question, but I don't grant. I just want to say that I don't see that she's equally culpable. She wasn't married.
Well, I'm of the opinion when you sleep with a married person, you're probably the worst of the two. You ever cheat on your wife? I think you're a bad dude for doing it. But the girl who slept with you, I think she's worse, because if she knew you.
Why? I mean, you had a bond that you broke with your wife. You violated the trust that you had with somebody.
Well, I agree. And
isn't that the worst thing that you in this situation? I mean, to me, the effect on the marriage is that you have caused on your own marriage, to me, is the worst aspect of that whole situation.
Well, as a married person, that what goes on between a man and a wife is a unique situation. But when a guy targets a married woman to sleep with her and goes out of his way and does everything he can and gets her to sleep with him, to me, I mean, we've even think about this, and in your back into evolved morality, we've actually established that if that man kills the guy who slept with his wife because he runs into the bedroom, he's actually innocent of any crime, because he was emotionally in a position where it wasn't his fault for killing a man who's sleeping with his wife. Now, if he kills the wife, he's at fault.
No, it doesn't work that way. I don't think that works that way.
You don't think? No, do you?
No, I mean,
Google.
I don't. I am aware of my uncertainty of the situation, but I would want to consult a lawyer before I accepted that.
I mean,
doesn't seem right.
Look up and tell me why I'm wrong.
But so you would. It seems like you're quicker to criticize her, and yeah. I don't feel Trump getting much of the heat from you.
Stormy Daniels took $165,000 hush money, right, and then turned around and ratted him out, and then tried to sue him for the defamation.
Of course, but she's not the president. So I actually don't, you're right. From a total moral standpoint, I'm not a lover of Stormy Daniels. I'm not particularly a fan of her breast size or whatever.
Lawyer, he was the worst.
that guy's another story. But he's the president. And so it's it's a different standard that we're holding him to. And
okay,
it's not just an issue of what a private
affair happened before he was president, right?
It did, but it speaks to his character, and there's no evidence that his character has been repaired or significantly changed since then. I mean, he seems to be the same guy, more or less.
We judge,
and so why
John F. Kennedy in the same standard? John F. Kennedy slept with women while married. Bill Clinton slept with while married in the White House.
Bill Clinton surely was judged for that, and he was basically impeached for it, right? The Republicans were very quick to make moral judgment on Bill Clinton.
He was impeached for lying to him.
I know he was technically impeached for lying, but the reasons that the impeachment proceedings were brought politically is because there was a moral judgment made about him by the religious right. And Trump hasn't faced the same judgment. It seems quite hypocritical, actually.
The religious
John F. Kennedy lived at different times.
Lying to a federal judge is not a religious right argument. It is a constitutional argument.
I'm not saying he shouldn't be impeached for perjury, obviously, but the reason he was testifying in the first place is because he was being held to account on a moral charge.
Right. Except, well, the whole Ken Starr investigation did get off the rail. I'll grant you 100% that this whole Mueller thing has gotten off the rail. And then this whole notion that we should have, that our political enemies should get special prosecutors to look into every aspect of someone's life. That's the job of the opponent before the election. Once the election's done, Obama was president. I'm not interested in whether or not he was in gay bathhouses in Chicago afterwards. He's president. That's the way it is.
And do you think that's what Mueller is looking into, whether Trump was in gay bathhouses? And what if there's if there's something to know about some subversive activity that happened within the government, don't we have the right to find out about that? I agree that political revenge is not good, but that's why it seems to be good that you have somebody like Mueller, who's a Republican himself. It doesn't seem to be out for revenge, personally.
Oh my goodness, rhinos.
He's a rhino. Actually, because he doesn't support Trump, or because of some other reason?
No. Have you ever looked into? I saw some article written about some of Mueller's past failings as a prosecutor and some of the things that he's done that have just been horrible. The guy is not this lily white prosecutor who's just trying to find truth. He had an agenda to try to prove that the reason the Democrats lost wasn't because they put Hillary up, it was because the Russians subverted our election, which is baloney. They did.
Why does he have that agenda?
Because that was the goal of the people that put him there. They wanted to discount his presidency. They wanted Trump gone, and it doesn't matter what the cost was. That's why for the last year it was Russia, 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 and then it was Stormy Daniels, Stormy Daniels, Stormy Daniels, and now it's Trump is a racist because 16,000 people are coming to cross our borders illegally, and he wants to stop them. He must be a racist.
Well, I mean, he could be a racist and also be right about immigration, right?
Well, that would be true, but I don't believe he's a racist.
I mean, you don't. But do you believe he's a racist in the sense of? So I don't know what kind of a racist he is, but I know he does. I believe he does things that would certainly seem racist or out of date with respect to how we deal with race. Like I'm pretty sure the tapes of him saying the N-word are real. If those tapes are out there, does that change your opinion of him, or do you not care about that kind of language?
What's a greater judge of a man's relationship with the black community? Awards given to him by the black community, or a tape where he said the N-word somewhere? Because
I'd say what someone does in private is more revealing of their character than what they do in public. When you're in public, you're trying to present yourself in a certain way, and that how he seems to be very interested in aggrandizing himself and appearances. And so, if there was a private tape of him doing it regularly, that to me would mean a lot.
Is there one? I haven't heard of one.
Supposedly Omarosa has confirmed this, and when he was on The Apprentice, basically there are all these outtakes of him using it. The implication is that he was using it to refer to her, actually, but apparently he said it more than one time, and it was like a regular occurrence for people on the set of The Apprentice to hear him say that.
And you've heard the tapes, or you've heard that Omarosa said there are tapes?
I have heard from someone who claims to have heard the tapes myself, but these tapes seem to be out there. I haven't heard them myself. That's why I'm saying I don't know for sure that they exist. It seems like there's good evidence that they do, but my question was, if they do, if those tapes come out and we hear him saying that, would that be evidence of him being racist, or are you okay with somebody speaking that way just because he's old-fashioned or whatever?
I guess I would say that it would very much disappoint me that Trump used the words casually.
Okay.
So yes, absolutely would bother me. Would it? But again, Trump got on the national scene because he talked about illegal immigration. That was his heard above the noise when there was however many people, 16 people running. He grabbed the immigration as an example. And there are plenty of people who are upset about immigration and illegal immigrants who have committed crimes in this country and killed people, raped people, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, they're disproportionately relevant in jails and prisons, and there's a lot of issues with illegal immigration. Is it racist to say that because someone's here illegally, they're therefore a bad person? I don't think it is.
I don't think that's racist either. But I do think that he benefits from the support of racists, and he knows that, and he seems to walk the line in a way that allows him to stoke that support, but still not lose the support of people who would be disappointed if he said something overtly racist.
Okay, I'm of the belief that the racists in this country are a small minority. I don't believe that there is a large majority of people who are racist, in the sense of I will go out of my way to hurt somebody who's black or Mexican because I don't like them as a race. Are there people who say I don't like large groups of black youths walking down the street? I think, what's his name? Oh, it'd be better if I could follow that up with Jesse Jackson. He said that if I see I hear people walking behind me and I turn around and it's a group of black kids, I'm more uncomfortable than if it's a group of white kids. Now, is he a racist because he said that? I mean, that's a racist statement, but no one accused Jesse Jackson of being a racist.
Right. I mean, I think the question of how many racists there are in the country is an interesting one. There's certainly varying degrees of racism that come in. And so I think that's a difficult question to answer.
And when you think like racist, like neo-Nazi racist,
I mean, no, that's an extreme, but I feel like people like I live in close to where you live in California, and I'm as a white guy, I don't experience racism firsthand, although I'm in a multiracial family, so I have seen it a little bit, but it's not a huge part of my life here living in a big liberal multicultural city. But I know that the experience would be very different if I lived somewhere in the South, for example. So I feel sort of unqualified to gauge that from my personal experience.
In the Democratic stronghold, you mean? The South?
Yeah. Right.
So when I told you my mother was extremely liberal. When we were living on a farm in Ohio, to show how non-racist she was, she adopted a young black baby. So my little sister is black my whole life. So I grew up going to school with a sister who's black, that's the way it was. So I don't have an experience of racism like a black person does, but I do have an experience of racism of somebody whose sister is black. And people, if they said something around me, I had to either say something back or suck it up and not say anything. And honestly, the number of times when I had to, was confronted with that was very small. And that was growing up in a farm in Ohio and then moving to Southern California. So
right.
In a way, I have probably a more unique experience than most, but it doesn't, again, experiential knowledge, my knowledge of racists is very limited because California, we just don't have a lot of racists here.
Well, I agree that you don't have to be racist to oppose immigration. But immigration seems to me like a really difficult problem to deal with because you have to balance your desire for compassion and fairness with your desire to make sure that the country is doing well. So it just seems to me like Republicans, Democrats would just tip the scales differently on that, where the Republicans seem more interested in protecting the existing in-group, and the Democrats seem more interested in extending compassion to the out-group. Do you see it that way at all, or am I not?
I understand how you could put that in those words and that perspective, because it's easy to have a emotional explanation for why it's compassionate to let people who are in horrible living conditions come to America where it's good. But there's also the reality that there is a finite number of those people we can help, right?
Agreed.
So if we were to come up with a solution and say that we are going to allow 2 million people a year to come in our country, that would be an argument then you and I could discuss. You think it should be 2.5. I think it should be 2.1. Now we get to argue that point. That's at least that's an argument that we can come to a conclusion with. Right now, there's this nebulous. Democrats have taken the all immigrants should be allowed in all the time. That's not how you. That's not reality. You can't have that. You can't have
I agree with
unlimited. And Europe is dealing with that right now. So
you. Hmm.
we do have to have a control. Smart immigration laws. It's so difficult now to become an American citizen. Should it be? That's an argument that you can have about that process. But
Yeah.
but right now, I believe that the left and the Democrats have decided that rather than try to make a case, they're just going to hold off on the emotional side of it and say it's compassionate. Well, yes, it
Mhm.
is compassionate. I agree 100%. Helping people is a compassionate perspective, and Americans help more people than anyone. I mean, every time we invade a country and take it over, we leave it better than when we came. So we're just a compassionate people. We also happen to be
What
the
do you
best in the world at everything.
What do you make of the whole situation with the kids being separated from their families?
And there's a good example. If it's phrased taking kids away from their parents, you're like, oh, that's horrible. Why should we do that? If it's phrased, we're going to be taking this parent and putting them in a jail. Now, should we also put the children in the jail with them, or should we put the children in a facility that's going to take care of them, give them food, education, everything else, medicine, and take care of them? But we have to separate them to do that because the parents are going to.
Well, why wouldn't we hold on? Why don't we just do that for everybody? I mean, illegal immigration is one thing, but if someone's coming to the country applying for asylum, why wouldn't you put them in all in some facility where you're taking care of them and making sure they have medicine and et cetera?
Well, I'll tell you why. Because right now, what is it? 10% to 15% of asylum seekers are granted. 85% are denied because it's been taught all you have to do is say you're seeking asylum. You get 2 years here. Just say you're seeking asylum and you'll get to stay. So now we have created a system that isn't adequately dealing with the problem. And so now we have problems that are above that. So the problem isn't, are we taking children away from the parents? The problem is we have a system that has allowed people to cheat. And now we're stuck having to deal with millions of people who say, oh, I need asylum. Why? Because I want to live here.
Yeah, I agree that's a problem, and we're stuck dealing with that situation. But it just seems to me that since we're stuck dealing with that situation, we should do it in the most humane way that's available to us. Was there is there anything that you can criticize Trump for? Anything he does that you're not happy with? Any place that you disagree with him?
Okay, I'm really happy with his stance on trade. I think he has, this whole. I went back on the FCP forum for a little while, and all I heard was about how trade wars are bad and we can't do anything trade war. And everything Trump did in the trade facility benefited America. All these countries started realizing, hey, we have to have American markets open to us. And if they shut it down to us, we're screwed. We have to take what they give us. And now, is it moral or right? That's not relevant. What's relevant is we elect politicians to represent America, not the world. If we were electing people to the world court, they should represent the world. We represent people to represent America. So doing the best they can for America, I'm very happy with. Militarily, Republicans are always pro-military. How can you be against pro-military? He's going to.
Well,
I'm trying to think of any of the policies he's done. Honestly, the truth is, I follow very little of what he's doing of any of those guys. I mean, I read the Twitter feeds, and those are all slanted towards whatever subject, Stormy Daniels or whatever. And for the most part, I mean, the whole "it's Russia, Russia, Russia" was such a distraction. It actually became a chicken little, sky is falling. The truth is now, if they actually had a connection to Russia, I think most of America would say it's not true. Just like the last 100 other things that were going to break Trump and bring it down, and this is the beginning of the end.
Well, look, we haven't seen the evidence yet, right? Mueller has not concluded his investigation or issued a report. And in the meantime, Trump's campaign manager, his national security advisor, his best buddies are all in jail or under indictment. His lawyer. I mean, is that all just a coincidence? Are these guys the subject of a witch hunt, or was there any actual criminality going around him?
I'm a believer we could fix our economy if we just go after every lawyer in this country for tax evasion. And that's what Trump's lawyer is going into, all right? Tax evasion. He spent $6 million on a condo in New York And a few weeks later, he's got a GoFundMe page for his legal fees because he's going to bring down Trump, and people are giving money to him. That's how insane it's gotten. This guy's a multimillionaire. They paid cash for something, and then he turns around and says, "Give me money for my legal fees," and people give him money. That's insane, and that shows you the Trump derangement syndrome of people wanting to get Trump so bad. They got people on things.
He pleaded guilty
to what?
To a campaign finance violation.
Which was, what did he do?
And also, I don't remember the details. Basically, didn't report the money. They violated the rules for how you're supposed to report money, and that supports a campaign. And Paul Manafort, it seems to have been involved in even more sinister stuff. I mean, yeah, the Cohen thing, we don't know all that he did because he seems to be cooperating. But Manafort, who didn't cooperate, was involved in basically an international crime ring.
Right.
And do you think that Trump, in all these years of being in
Ukraine,
a real estate developer,
before he even knew Trump, but that stuff was, Manafort did, all that stuff was pre-Trump. He didn't even know Trump before then.
No.
So,
no, he's been living in Trump Tower for like 15 years.
Okay. Therefore, Trump is in financial dealings with every single person who lives in Trump Towers.
The ones that he invites to be his campaign manager, yes. I mean, these guys are old friends. They're not like, he's not a casual acquaintance. This guy was involved in the real estate business in New York. I mean, it's basically the whole industry is criminal. He's running a huge crime family. He's the head of an international crime ring, and you elected him president.
Again, we're shocked that that Trump, the politician, would lie. We're shocked that a developer in New York City is corrupt. I'm going to tell you right now, there isn't a developer in New York City who doesn't have corruption in his life, because that's how you.
That's exactly my point. Right. Which is why you don't elect those guys to run the country.
That's right. I was taking a drink. Again, he was last man standing. This has more to do with last man standing against Hillary Clinton than it does with, is Donald Trump the choice that we all didn't take a whole list of people and say the only person we want is Trump.
Look, I'm not a fan of Hillary Clinton, but I mean, even against Hillary Clinton, to pick a guy who is, this extreme in his criminality and unethical behavior and his psychological makeup is just, I mean, it's an absurdity. Are you going to vote? You're planning, I assume you're going to vote for him again.
I'm going to vote for him just for his tweets, man. Those tweets are gold. I mean,
he doesn't have to stop tweeting. He just needs to get out of the White House. He can tweet from Trump Tower.
There's this book out called Save Your Generals. And it was written, I think it was last year it came out. And it's a biography of 5 generals throughout history, all the way to the Polynesian Wars, and about how they were the greatest generals in each conflict they were in. And they were talking about the qualities and the makeups and how they. And the interesting part of every one of those generals was that in real life, they were failures. But when put into a war situation where they were in charge, they were fabulous. They did a fabulous job. They were made for that position. So MacArthur, a good example in the Korean War, MacArthur is this Ivy League perfect general. He's got all the pedigree. He's got everything. He's supposed to be the perfect general. He was a screw up in the Korean War. The Korean War was a big quagmire. It just failed. It's funny because 4 of the guys I play poker with every week are Korean War veterans. And we talked about this after I read this book. The guy who took over from MacArthur was one of these guys that he was talking about. And he changed the war. He changed how we fought it. And he reduced the number of lives lost. He gave he did all these things. But in every case, these generals, Sherman was another one, failed at business, failed at everything. He couldn't do anything right. Then he gets in charge of an army and he invades Atlanta and he just puts pressure on the Southern army to where they eventually collapse. There's just this notion that a person should be perfect at everything in order to be good at one thing. Donald Trump may be a terrible everything, but that doesn't make him a bad president.
But you're right. He's a very good golfer. That's the context in which he thrives, and so And yeah, that's why he puts himself in that position. I mean, we all put ourselves in the environments where we
He
thrive.
puts too much weight shift in his front foot, and when he comes through, he makes it work. And that's a good example. He doesn't do things the way you're supposed to do golf, but he's learned to make his golf game work for him, and he's really good at it. So you can argue all day. Tiger Woods was a flawed human being who did a lot of bad things and cheated on his wife and did all this stuff, and it all came crashing down on him. But he was the greatest golfer that ever lived. Period. I mean,
I know, but it seems to be a complete counterexample. I mean, this is somebody who might be good at like organizing a TV show,
right.
but is in the worst possible position for him. I mean,
because we know what a
being the president of a yes, we do. We get to decide what that is. That's exactly what we of course we know
decide. And now,
well, the country decided. More people voted for Hillary Clinton, right? The reason that he became president is because of an undemocratic principle of the way our system is set up, that it doesn't actually reflect what the people wanted.
You stated the obvious. The way our system is set up. He ran based on how the system was set up, not on getting the most votes. Hillary
of course, but what I'm saying is it's a flawed system. It's not a virtue of him that he is so beloved by the people. He happened to take advantage of a flaw in the system.
The founding fathers didn't think that it would matter to have states have a voice in the government. They just wanted population to have a voice. California, Texas, and Ohio should rule the world.
Well, that's definitely true. Maybe not Ohio, but California. The founding fathers weren't. Well, that's we don't want to get into a real argument, because if we start talking about Ohio, that's what's going to happen. It's going to get personal.
Cavaliers won.
Oh man!
And you got the Browns.
Oh my God! But the founding fathers were dealing with a totally different political situation than we have now, and they were dealing with a different population system than we have now. They weren't dealing with a situation where there was such population equality between California and Wyoming that somebody voting in Wyoming has 10 times the power of somebody voting in California. If that were the situation, yeah, they do.
How many electoral college votes are in Wyoming? How many are in California?
I'll send you a chart.
It's based on population.
It's not evenly based on population. I'll send you a chart of the.
So it's slanted towards the under. It's slanted toward the under guy.
But isn't that what you just said, that they wanted the states to have some power? It's slanted,
right?
Yeah,
slanted towards the underdogs. That's America.
No,
we always root for the underdog.
Well, you can root for the underdog, but to give more power to one person than another is not a democratic principle.
Okay, let me ask you this: you study the issues, and you go there into the voting booth and you vote, and some random person goes in and randomly picks numbers. Why should those two votes be equal? And they are. Right now, they're 100% equal.
So that raises the question of whether voting should be based on merit. And in an ideal world, that I'd be willing to entertain that argument, but it's virtually impossible to measure something like who's more qualified to vote, and ultimately always ends up in something unfair. So it seems like the best system is to just give everybody one vote, but that's not the system that we have right now. I mean, there are people who effectively have more votes than other people because of the Electoral College and because of the Senate.
But the system is set up that way beforehand. Both sides knew it. Hillary Clinton had the most advanced campaign, and all through the campaign beforehand, because I was on FCP, all I heard about was Trump didn't even have the smart people. He doesn't even know how to buy ads. He's an idiot. He doesn't have the foundation. Hillary Clinton has all the fundraising. She outspent him 3-1. She did everything you're supposed to do to win the election, except actually win, because Trump said, I'm going to do things how this system is. I'm going to go to Wisconsin and try to get Wisconsin to vote for me. I'm going to go here and the dude had energy.
He won the election. I'm not disputing that he won the election. I'm just disputing that the people that you can say because he won the election, that in general the people wanted him to be president, because more people didn't want him to be president than wanted him to be president.
Well, I would argue that more people didn't want either one of them to be president because they didn't vote. 300 million people and 130 million votes. So 170 million people didn't care enough to vote. So from that argument, nobody should be president because more people didn't vote for either one of them. Isn't that correct?
It isn't correct because the people who didn't vote, so there's always a percentage of the people who vote and a percentage of the people who don't vote. And in general, the people who do vote are some sampling of the people who are eligible to vote, and they tend to be close to a representative sample. I mean, there's some bias there. In other words, it's not true that everyone who doesn't vote doesn't care one way or the other. Most of the people do have preferences, and those preferences more or less align with the population of people who do vote. Now, there's certainly a lot of apathy in the election because the choices sucked so bad. I definitely grant you that, and I personally would have preferred if neither of them were president. But it certainly isn't. You really can't make a case that most of the people in the country wanted him to be president. It seems to be like a number that hovers between 35 and 40% of the people.
Which is about average for every single president we've had in the last 100 years.
No, there are only two presidents who have lost the popular vote and become president.
Yeah, I know. George Bush was the first one. I love that. Was gorgeous. When all we heard was the stolen election, the Supreme Court was slanted, and there were so many facts that totally dispute that, and it doesn't change the fact there are people who honestly believe. Just like right now, I think I remember reading that 60% of Democrats believe that Sarah Palin said, "I can see Russia from my house." 60% of the Democrats believe an SNL skit was real. Now,
what was the actual quote, though?
She didn't say anything about. She said, "You can see Russia from Alaska," which is true. Alaska and Russia are close enough that you can see it from one point.
Okay, well, that seems like hair splitting. I mean, what is the difference there?
Really?
I mean, her house is in Alaska, isn't it?
I can see Russia from my house was the mocking statement that everyone makes about her. And 60% of Democrats believe that she made that. She never said that. She said Russia is close enough. She was talking about geopolitical issues and how, as governor of Alaska, she dealt with Russia because Russia is so close. The closest state to Russia is Alaska, and you can even see Alaska from Russia. That's how close they are. So that's all relevant and intelligent and perfectly viable. But it was mocked on SNL to say, "You can see Russia from my porch." And that has become believed as true to over half Democrats still believe that, even though it's not true. So yeah, the fact is,
the point of mocking her was that she was somebody who appeared to be pretty dumb. And I don't, that the particular wording of that quote aside, I think Sarah Palin was not qualified to be vice president.
Well, again, if I'm going to have a politician lie to me, I'd rather she had big boobs. So.
Okay, fair enough.
I can look at her a lot better than I can look at John McCain. Could have. Too soon?
Yeah, well, no, he wasn't so bad looking.
Yeah, whatever. I did his balloon. All right. I did the balloon drop for McCain and for Dole and for Gore and for Romney and for Hillary and for Trump. Trump's the only one that I did the balloon drop for that won. I was 0 and 5 going into that. I never got to do either one of the Bush's elections because one year I was doing the MTV show in Miami, so I couldn't do it. And the other year I forget why I couldn't go. So I never had a winning convention until Trump.
Did you do something differently during that one?
I know that I was frustrated as could be because his acceptance speech was so long. When you're on the catwalks above everything, all you can hear is Charlie Brown's adults. Wah, 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 wah. And I'm sitting up there with this union crew, and we're all just going crazy. Come on. And the interesting thing is half the union crew was way pro-Trump. They were so for Trump. And then we got to Philly and did the Democrat one. And that was interesting. That was a good example of the media bias. There was nonstop protests by the Bernie supporters. They were walking the hallways with tape over their mouths and signs saying, we've been silenced. And there was banners being thrown out, giant banners that said, Bernie was robbed and all this stuff. We never saw any of it on the news coverage because they wanted to show United Front.
So we've been talking for 2 hours now, and I want to. There's a couple of things I just
Yeah, you better edit this down because
I'm
nobody's
going
going
to
to.
edit. I don't want to strain the attention span of our audience, although we've said a lot of good stuff. But I want to make sure that I have a chance to ask you about your cigars before we're done, and to give you a chance to say anything that we haven't said. So tell me about how you got into cigars and why you love them so much.
I started smoking cigarettes when I got sober, and I smoked for 6 years. And then when I got saved, I thought you weren't allowed to smoke as a Christian, so I quit. Um, Sorry, my guy's texting me that one of the parties he's striking is still going on, so I told him to wait.
Hmm.
Um, so I started smoking cigars, listening to Rush Limbaugh. He was talking about how much he loves cigars and everything, and I thought, cigars are cool. My father smoked a pipe my whole life, and so I remember that smell of good tobacco in the house and in the car, and I always loved that smell. So I started smoking. The very first cigar I got made me sick as the dog. I got a Cuban Punch cigar from Tijuana. I brought it home and I smoked it around a fireplace, and I had to go lay down because I was sick. And so I didn't smoke for a while, and I was worried that if I started smoking cigars, it would cause me to go back to cigarettes, and I really didn't want to. So over at the Tinderbox in Palm Springs, a group of guys used to hang out, and these were all mostly successful guys from all walks of life. And they were all they'd have a cigar, and they'd sit out in front of it, and they just talk about whatever, the world, politics, religion, women. It was just a place to come and hang out and talk. And I started smoking to hang out with these guys, and it was fascinating to me. I mean, I met guys who are just taxi drivers who are just the scummiest people in the world, to billionaire who used to drive up in his Ferrari, to there's a PhD astrophysicist who I've had a lot of interesting conversations with. And that camaraderie of being around, having a cigar, and getting to know people, it just seems like cigar smokers are this outward, um, people who love, enjoy experiences in life. And so it was a lifestyle that I started getting around. And now, of course, I'm probably addicted. But we went to we went on safari in Africa a couple years back with another couple from Canada. It's funny because he says in Canada he's a super conservative, and in America he's a super liberal. So we have great conversations because I drive his wife nuts. But we were on safari for a week, and I didn't have any cigars. And then we went to Cape Town for a week, and first thing I did was went and bought some cigars, but I didn't have an opportunity to smoke any. And it took 3 days before I lit a cigar up. And I remember thinking, I went 9 days without a cigar, and I didn't have any physical pains or withdrawals or anything. So I know that I can not smoke because I don't inhale. I just really enjoy it. So I just love cigars. The hardest thing of losing money was going from good cigars to cheap cigars. That was for sure.
What is the best cigar in the world?
The best cigar in the world is after a great experience.
Huh.
Whatever it is, the best cigar I ever remember was the very first Republican convention I did in San Diego. We were here. I'm part of this huge event. I drop all these balloons and this confetti, and the people are screaming, and you get goosebumps, and you're walking down, and you were part of something huge. And I got in my van to drive home, and I lit a cigar, and that was the best cigar I ever had. So I don't think that, Cubans are good. I've had good Cubans. I've had bad Cubans. I like a lot of different, Dominicans and Hondurans. And there's a really good Mexican cigar that's super cheap called a Matacon that I really enjoy. So, cigars are just like anything else. It's whatever flavor you happen to like. But I think smoking that experience is definitely the real benefit to it. But I smoke every night. I go outside. I sit in my backyard. I smoke a cigar or two. Actually, okay, I smoke 2 cigars every time. And I play online poker for play money because I can't play real money. And it's just an experience I do to relax and get out of everything. And my wife hates the smoke, and I wear this hat and this fleece jacket to keep the cigar smoke off me, so I can go inside and wash my face and hands and go to bed. Yeah, I smoke too much. I definitely do. I got to cut back. I'm smoking like $200 a week. I gotta.
$200 a week.
Yeah, I know.
How much does a good cigar cost? I'm a complete cigar um, novice. I've had maybe a puff on one once, and it did make me sick. So I don't know anything about them. What do they cost?
You can okay if you go to a store in California, the cheapest cigar you're going to find is going to be about $5, and the most expensive would be around $30. So that's for one cigar. Online, I buy a lot of inexpensive cigars that are under $2. I buy 30 or 40 at a time, and then I'll buy like a box of $11 cigars that cost $200. So I'll keep the good cigars for like after a big day when I've done a bunch of jobs and trying to reward myself, or after a big steak dinner or something good. And then if I go play golf, I'll grab four cheap cigars and smoke four cheap cigars on the golf course. But that's what I do in the summer, because in the summer I don't work. All I do is I go to the club here and I play golf and I smoke cigars. And I go out about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. It's about 105, 110, and there's no one out there. And I play by myself, and I get some Pandora going. Sometimes I listen to Christian music. Sometimes I listen to thrasher Japanese metal music. I listen to this baby metal. It's kind of a cool band.
That's good. That's a good range you've got.
Yeah.
All right.
I
Nice.
really don't. I mean, I've done these shows, like I do the MTV Video Music Awards, and I did one in Miami, and they said, "Hey, the cue for the balloon drop is going to be when Outkast sings 'Hey Ya.'" And I said, "I've never heard the band or the song." And they're like, "It's the number one song in America." I'm like, "Not to me, it's not. If it's not Dean Martin, I've never heard of him." And so my son was super embarrassed. They had to give me headsets because I didn't know who this band was or what to do. Then I did Rihanna when it was at the Staples Center, and I had to listen to that stupid song 20 times in a row during rehearsal. So now I know that song inside out.
Oh man. Well, so before we wrap up, is there any topic that I didn't ask you about that you want to talk about? Is there anything else you want to say?
Well, it's funny because obviously our connection is the forums, the FCP, and then 4Bet Bluff. And I know I went on to 4Bet Bluff and I started listening to IQ Crash. That's fascinating. And didn't listen to Spec Brad or Cobalt Blue, but I probably will. I almost played golf with Spec Brad in Florida, but I was feeling sick, and I just found out my daughter had cancer, and so we didn't go. But anyway, I sometimes I miss that fun that the FCP days when we were all you almost couldn't keep up with the thread because so many people were talking, and it was just a challenge to even keep up. And I really enjoyed it. And then what ended up happening, and I always regret this, is because I used to just be there for the jokes and the fun, and then I started getting into the religion. I love arguing religion, and there weren't that many people in there. There's a few people like Crow T Robot and stuff who drove me insane. I wanted to mute him, but we didn't have that option there.
Oh man, I forgot about that guy.
Yeah, but other people like you and Long Live York, guys who are smart and have reasonable arguments and they weren't offended that I had a different opinion, but were willing to challenge me. And if I have a belief system that can't be challenged, then my belief system is flawed. So I'm all for challenging my belief systems. And so I enjoyed that. But then I got into the politics things, and people take politics way too serious. I mean, I got stuck becoming I'm this super Republican, and it pigeonholed me into this. And then it was Dirty Dutch. He made a comment about how much he loved how I trolled in the in the politics section. And in a way I did. I used to bait people to try and get them to take a position so I could smash it. Just because, it was kind of fun. I mean, it's fun to bait people and do that stuff. But once he used the word troll, that became it. The balloon guy became the troll. And it suddenly stopped being fun. It started becoming contentious, and people were getting angry. And then when I went to 4Bet Bluff, I was like, you know what? I'm going to totally tone down the politics and just try to enjoy poker and the people that I met that I like, and at the golf tournaments and stuff. And what ended up happening, sure enough, I'm an idiot, and I got in the politics section, and next thing I know, people are angry, and I'm like, you know what? This whole part of this section was for friends to get together and discuss things, and I've turned it into a lightning rod for anger. And I just had to leave because it was, it was a bad thing. That's not who I am. I'm so non-political in my real life. I mean, I'll argue, but when I have Republican friends, I actually take the other position just to challenge them. And like I was telling you earlier, I have this buddy who plays croquet, and he's as far left, atheist as you can get. And we sit and have a cigar and just argue things, and it's enjoyable because we both recognize that you can disagree about something, and it doesn't mean that I have to hate you. You're not a Nazi because you're a Republican, and you're not whatever the soup du jour today is for the left, just because you believe that compassion should be your underlying philosophy in everything you do. And so it's a sad thing how much it destroys to be so dogmatic that you can't see beyond a different opinion. And I'm at fault for not, controlling myself. I allowed myself to become that caricature, and I fostered it, and I built it up, and then so in a way, I ruined it for myself, and it's a shame because, Lefty Golfer comes out here, and we hook up and we go play golf, and I bet you we don't even talk about politics. We might talk about what's going on in FCP or some people we know, but otherwise we're just talking about business and what's going on with our lives and our wives, things that are important and real. And,
Sure. It's interesting. I think on 4BB, the politics thread is one of the more active areas of discussion, just because it's easy to have a topic to talk about and to argue about, and there's just like a lot of meat there for people to dig their teeth into. So there is like an overrepresentation of that aspect of things in the conversation. But I mean, you're always, of course, I miss you, and I think a lot of people do. And you're always welcome to pop in and say something about politics or not, about your life or whatever. So we'd love to have you back as much as you want to be.
Yeah, and there's a bunch of people listening right now going, "No, shut the hell up! What you talking
about?" No, I don't think so. I mean, I think even in the politics thread, one of the things that's happened is that people have started complaining that the views are too homogenized, and we don't want to be in a bubble where we're just.
It's the most boring thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's the most boring thing in the world for two people to tell each other they're right.
That's right. I mean, especially for someone like me who is right all the time. It's like I don't need to be told that.
You were wrong that one time, remember?
I thought I was, but I made a mistake.
Yeah. You've got a good deal going, man. You con the system to be able to play on MRI machines all day. And and you got the cutest little girl. She's adorable.
Yeah, she is.
I haven't seen any pictures lately, but that last Halloween where you dressed up as a gorilla was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I've got a really nice gorilla costume, and I try to find opportunities to put it on whenever I can.
Yeah, like you don't put it on when you're alone. Come on.
No, I do. I sit around and just watch TV in it sometimes.
You got to keep it fresh.
Well, Rob, listen, I really appreciate you talking to me. It's always great to talk to you. And like I said, you're always welcome to come back and pop in. I think people would love to hear from you more.
Yeah, I'm curious how much you're going to cut this back. 2 hours, 25 minutes. We're screwed, man. You're going to be like...
for the other ones, people said that they don't mind listening long. Especially since I'm listening to myself when I'm editing it, I like to hear less and less of it. So I'll try to cut out the parts that are lulls or where we repeat ourselves. I want to give the full picture of what we talked about without putting my own spin on it too much. So I'll try to leave it as it is and just cut out anything that's just where maybe it went totally off the rails or just dragged on or anything. But
well, if you don't edit at least something I said to make it sound like something I didn't say, I'll be disappointed.
I should have asked you questions specifically to give me the sound bites I need for that.
I am wrong. I slept with Daniels.